For those of you keeping track, this is week 5 in Lent. This is the 5th week in Lent, which means next Sunday is Palm Sunday, and the one after that is Easter. And Easter being in 2 weeks is not a truth that I've wrapped my head around fully. I'm going to have to deal with that probably this week. But that also means that we are almost through our series, our Lent series, Wandering Heart, this figuring out faith with Peter, which means we have another Peter story. Peter is a small part in this story. He only just gets to ask one question, but it's a good question. And through that question, he gives us another lesson in faith. Hear these words from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 18, verses 15 through 22. If another member of the church sins against you, go and point out the fault when the two of you are alone. If the member listens to you, you have regained that one. But if you are not listened to, take 1 or 2 others along with you, so that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If the member refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if the offender refuses to listen even to the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly I tell you, if 2 of you agree on earth about anything you ask, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them. Then Peter came and said to him, Lord, if another member of the church sins against me, how often should I forgive? As many as 7 times. Jesus said to him, not 7 times, but I tell you 77 times. May God add understanding to the hearing of these words. Will you pray with me, please? Holy and gracious God, be within us and among us as we turn our hearts and our minds to you. Amen. I don't know if you heard it this way. When I heard it, there was something strange about this passage. It's like we're getting conflicting messages in the middle of it. It's like when you get 2 pieces of advice, right, that are both right in their own way, but when you put them together, it seems like they contradict one another. It's like telling people both, be brave, put yourself out there and explore, and also be careful. It's a very dangerous world. And you go, well, which one? And we say, well, yes. And so the first part of this story is if someone has wronged you, confront it, and if they won't listen, kick them out. And the second part is radical forgiveness. 77 times, or it's sometimes translated 70 times, 7 times, which I'm pretty sure is 490 times. And for those of us wondering which one it is, 77 or 490, I'd say let's get to 77 first, and then we'll see how it goes. It means as many times as it takes. So which one is it? Set firm boundaries and fair processes to protect the integrity and health of our community, or forgive as freely as God has forgiven you? Is it 3 strikes and you're out, or as many fresh starts as we need? And the answer, of course, is yes. So let's talk a little bit about how that works, at least as I see it. So we'll start with the beginning part of this story. So usually I stand up here and I tell you that the Bible is largely and usually symbolic, figurative, that we have to take it seriously but not literally, and it is more likely to be descriptive of how things are than it is to be proscriptive, meaning telling us exactly how we have to be. Well, today you can throw most of that away because it doesn't get more proscriptive than this. This whole thing reads like an HR procedure. This first part at least is a step-by-step, line by line, process for reconciliation work. And it is tough and real and wise. And it says if someone, and not just anyone, but in this case, another member of the church. So this all assumes that this is member to member, brother and sister in faith, in a community where it really matters that we stay together, and everyone's trying their best. It assumes all that, knowing that even when we have our best of intentions and everybody's trying our best, we still make mistakes and get sideways with one another. If another member sins against you, first, go and point it out when you're alone. Bring it up to them privately. First of all, what it doesn't say is avoid it, ignore it, repress it all, let it build up in you. No, it says address it. Respectfully, humbly, kindly, firmly. Address it one-on-one. And if they hear you, great. As they say, then you have regained that one. If they don't, bring a couple other people with you. Sometimes we all need new perspectives. 2 or 3 others, if we trust them, they can help us communicate well and share well and listen well and help us figure out what's going on. Maybe there's something in there everybody needs to learn. If nothing else, it says you've also got witnesses then. You got some things, people who can vouch for how things actually went. And then if that doesn't work, if the offender still will not listen to you or to them, bring it to the whole community. And if they still don't listen, they are out. And that doesn't mean you kick them out. What it means is they are already gone. This confirms that they are already out. They are already lost. They are already on the outside. They have already chosen something else. All those attempts at reconciliation are attempts to bring them back in. But if they refuse, when Jesus says, let them be to you as a Gentile or a tax collector, that is an outsider, not a member of this community, it's a way of saying, let them be where they are. They have chosen to be out. It's sad, but it's also similar, as I hear it, to the way that some have spoken about divorce. The divorce doesn't end the relationship so much as it acknowledges that the relationship has ended. Not everybody is willing to or feels called to work at reconciliation and bring it all back together. And this admits that it doesn't always go that way. Even Jesus can't heal something if both people don't want it to work. But this is how you try if you want to. So that's part 1. Part 2 is where Peter comes in, with a good question and ready to learn. So once again, Peter is the one who asks on behalf of all the disciples. In a way, he asks on behalf of us. Maybe he asks what we would have asked if we were there. And he says, what about forgiveness? He seems to have a clue, sort of, I know that's got to be in there. What about forgiveness? I know it's related, it's a part of it. And he says, Lord, if another member of the church sins against me, how often should I forgive? As many as 7 times. I wonder what Peter thought Jesus would say when he said that. Should I forgive them once, in sort of a fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me kind of way? Should I forgive them 3 times? With Jesus, 3 times is always a good guess. Jesus, it's always 3 times. That's what I would have guessed. I would have gone with 3. And instead he guesses what must have felt to him like a radical number, an extravagant number. As many as 7 times. And I wonder if he really expected him to say as many as it takes. So what do you do with that? What do we do with that? Jesus could have said, okay, Peter, I did just walk through step by step what to do if someone wrongs you. Were you listening? Knowing Peter, there's a chance he did zone out halfway between what he had just talked through. But still the question is a good one. Where does forgiveness come in? What is the goal of forgiveness? What even is forgiveness? It isn't good enough for me to just say, Jesus says, forgive each other, even though that would be a lot shorter. So I'm sorry. We all might mean something different by forgiveness. So let's talk about that for a moment. Yeah, let's tackle forgiveness in 5 minutes, as if 1,000 books and 10 lifetimes couldn't be spent on figuring out forgiveness. But let's talk about some of the basics, especially because some of us might be trying to unlearn some bad ideas we've learned about forgiveness over the years. First, let's forget, forgive, and forget. It's not a thing. You definitely can't tell someone to forgive and forget. You can't tell yourself to forgive and forget. Forgiving is not forgetting, which usually we're just lying about. We really don't forget. And we probably shouldn't really forget. We should learn from what happened, not pretend it didn't happen and say we don't remember. If we ever do forget, someday it will only be because the relationship has now so good for so long that whatever happened has receded into its proper proportion and it doesn't affect our daily life anymore. But you can't make yourself forget. In fact, as I said, we probably shouldn't forget, because forgiveness doesn't mean clear the slate as if nothing happened, or a get-out-of-jail-free card for someone who is just going to continue to hurt you over and over. Forgiveness does not mean allowing continued bad behavior. I mean, this is Healthy Boundary 101. You can understand why someone is doing something. You can empathize with them. You can have compassion for them. You can even forgive them for what they have done in the past. It still doesn't mean they get to keep doing that to you or to other people. You don't have to hate them, but you don't have to be with them either. If they have no interest in being healthy and kind to you, so letting people off the hook who actually have no interest in learning or being better in the future, it doesn't help us, and it doesn't help them either. I think we've seen this in some ways in our cultural conversation about apologies. If anybody's been tracking the evolution of the apology in our culture over the last decade, you've seen this. We've had to work on our apologies a little bit. So the days of, if I offended someone, I'm sorry, are over. We know what a real apology is and isn't now. And a real one has all of this. 1, I feel remorse for what I did. I'm sorry. 2, I understand that what I did caused hurt, and that hurt is real and valid. 3, this is what I've learned about what happened and what I should have done differently. And 4, now I am committing myself to doing it differently in the future. And you'll see that I've changed by how I am. All of that is a real apology. Only after that does someone ask for forgiveness, and only when the person who has been hurt is ready and wants to start again, which may be never. Forgiveness cannot be demanded. You are never owed forgiveness. It can be asked for, and then it's given, or not. There are a million other things to say about forgiveness, but I'm going to pick only one more. You're welcome. And that's this. And it has to do with how these different parts of the story, as in conflict as they can seem, speak to one another. Forgiveness and reconciliation. Forgiveness is essential for reconciliation. But reconciliation doesn't have to be the goal of forgiveness. So if your goal is to reconcile, like in the first part of this passage, where members of the same family of faith in good faith approach one another trying to heal, where those who have been wrong acknowledge it, learn from it, and come back in, if that is your goal, forgiveness is essential. Because you can't be truly reconciled, together, restored, healthy, while someone is still carrying around this load of debts and resentments and bitterness. So if you want to be reconciled, we have to do the hard work of forgiveness. But the goal of forgiveness doesn't have to be reconciliation. You don't have to lose yourself trying to be in a relationship with someone who refuses to be good to you. You can forgive someone and still not want to, in the future, be in a relationship with them. So your goal doesn't have to be reconciling with another person, and still forgiveness might be the right thing for you to do for you. In fact, the main value of forgiveness might not be about reconciling with anybody else at all. It might be about your spiritual health and freedom. You forgive, maybe even most of the time, you forgive for yourself. You let go so you don't live your life tied to these old hurts. The other person may or may not care. They might change, they might not change. But you forgive them as part of your healing. You let that go so you are free to move on. Again, forgiveness is part of spiritual freedom. Or if you want to put it the other way, refusing to forgive is a form of spiritual captivity. You refusing to forgive most of the time doesn't hurt them. I think that's what we hope will happen, but it never does. It hurts you. They are probably not sitting around waiting for your forgiveness. You are sitting around holding on to what they did to you. Refusing to forgive keeps you tied to something awful, waiting on something that isn't going to come. Forgiving is letting that go. And maybe it feels like giving up on justice, but what you're really doing is untying yourself. And this is why I think Jesus challenges us to forgive as many times as it takes. Not counting up how many times have we done it, as much as other people have, as many times as it takes, so we don't go through our life accumulating grievances and nursing old hatreds and picking at old wounds. We forgive, if nothing else, for our own good. And then the more we forgive, the better we get at it. The better we get at it, the more we can see how much forgiveness we ourselves have needed. And hopefully we grow in compassion for others, and maybe then we're more generous in our forgiveness, which means we get even better at it. Maybe even someday forgiving ourselves. For many of us, we are our own hardest person to forgive, but that is definitely another whole sermon in itself. This is all the kind of forgiveness that Peter would need, and that he had needed over and over again already. And I wonder if this is another one of Peter's faithful gifts. Self-awareness. He knew how much forgiveness he needed. And that inspired him to be more forgiving of others. Maybe that's why he asked this question, why his mind went here. He knows what it's like to get it wrong and to need to be corrected, what it is to be outside and welcomed back, what it is to hurt someone and still love someone. So he's pretty interested in how forgiveness should go. This is the kind of forgiveness we all need because it is hard to be together. We are hard to be with. And we're still learning how to be. And today in this culture, most of our relationships are disposable. As soon as they break, as soon as they stop working for us, we throw them out. And this doesn't happen naturally. It doesn't come easily. And so when it comes to this hard, vulnerable, uncomfortable, healing work, many of us are pretty out of practice. Which means we all have a lot left to learn. And that's our faith lesson from Peter, week 5 in Lent. Lessons in learning. And just so I don't forget to say it every week in a row, here's the 5th week in a row, there is something wonderful about the love of God for us shown in Jesus' love for Peter. And here that lesson is every time we say, teach me about this. I am ready to learn this. God is there with the next step. Church needs to be a place where we love learning. Toxic religiosity says we know everything and we are always right and it's always everybody else who needs to change. Real faith knows that that is impossible. Real faith is always learning. We'll never be perfect. We'll never be done. There will be always things we're trying to do better, which means we better love the learning itself, because that's what most of our life will be. And so this is a challenge, this whole passage to us. Let us be, as a church and for one another, inspired to do better. Safe enough to be wrong and be okay. Humble enough to be led. Brave enough to try to do it differently. Willing to put in the work to make it work. Graceful enough to let go of what we can't control. And because all of that is really hard to do, always faithful enough to keep learning. Thanks be to God. Amen.